Hello, brothers and sisters. It is so good to be with you today. This, of course, is Readings with Regina, and I am Regina. I'd like to thank all of my subscribers. It just really touches my heart to know that you are there. And today, I actually have a surprise for you. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now, because if I did, it wouldn't be a surprise, would it? No. But I do have a surprise for you today. Now, I want to get right into the reading. This episode is called Sugar and Slavery, Sampson and the Revolutionary, Enslavers, Biracial Children. So we will examine each of those categories as we go along. But first, I want to start with The Half. You know that book. I've been reading from it for quite a while, and I think it's very important, especially the sugar and slavery part, because that section is going to talk about what many of us are experiencing today. And that's about the political trade with other countries and how it developed. Okay. So I'm going to get right to it because, like I said, I got a surprise later on for you in the program, and I want to get everything done that I've planned. All right. So I'm reading from The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward Baptiste. We're talking about sugar. In European shops and kitchens, sugar started as a luxury for the rich. By 1700, it was becoming the sweetener for the new middle classes' coffee and tea, also imperial taste. By 1800, the English poor could sometimes indulge in sugar as a luxury, as a stimulant that got one through a hard day of labor or a treat to quiet the crying child. Sugar and slavery quickened European trade, broadened the financial capital available to entrepreneurs, whetted the appetite for profit, and increased the revenue and power of centralizing states. But sugar and slavery had not definitively lifted the economies of Western Europe above those of the rest of the planet. China, which also consumed sugar, remained the massive gravitational center of world trade during much of the 18th century. Like the rest of the world, most Europeans were only one bad season from starvation. They all grew food by local traditions of agriculture that, in technological complexity, efficiency, and productivity, were closer to the year zero than to 1900. The great masses of the poor and the peasantry were as short as the man in the collar, for living standards for most people had not risen since the dawn of the agricultural era. On the quarterdeck, the white customs officer huddled with the captain. They walked over and stared at the man in the iron collar. Remember him? That enslaved man in the iron collar that was on board the Adventine ship. They walked over to the man in the iron collar and talked gibberish. The captain signed a paper, and the customs officer clambered back down. The man was still unnamed in white folks' documents, but ink had captured his presence again. The rowboat slipped back toward the house. The Adventine sailors pulled and hoisted. Anchors clanked and sails flapped. The wheel spun. The brig slid out into the ship channel. The man in the iron collar watched from the rail. The mist peeled back and a low, flat landscape came into view. For the next few days, the Adventine tacked with the river's winding turns through the new land made by the Mississippi. Slowly the banks rose. Low levees protected the flat land that lay behind. Mud gave way to green cane. First, he saw occasional huts, and then large houses surrounded by huts. 3 days later, the river turned right and straightened, and a small forest grove of masts came into view. They were in New Orleans. In 1800, French traveler Pierre-Louis de Vallon had seen a smaller forest of masts, but he saw enough to prophesy that New Orleans was, quote, destined by nature to become one of the principal cities of North America, and perhaps the most important place of commerce in the New World, end of quote. Projectors, visionaries, and investors who came to this city, founded by the French in 1718. Founded by the French? Now, what does that mean to us? Founded by the French? This means that the French had genocided or removed the Native American population. You understand that? By this time, the French had reservationed whatever Native people had previously been in this Mississippi area. Always remember that when I talk about land. Founded. This land was founded by the French, 1718, and ceded to the Spanish in 1763. Now, for some reason, France turned over this land that was once filled with Red Nation people to the Spanish in 1763. You see how land is moved around? Once people are removed, and I want everyone within the sound of my voice, look at your country today. Do you see any similarities? All right, let me proceed. The French ceded to the Spanish this land in 1763, could sense the same tremendous possible future. Sitting at the mouth of a river system, greater in economic potential, according to du Vallon, it was greater in economic potential than the Nile, the Rhine, the Danube, or the Ganges. New Orleans would be the great receptacle of the produce of half of the continent. Yet, powerful empires had been determined to keep the city from the United States. Now, remember, we're talking about France, we're talking about Spain, but we also are talking about the United States, which has recently become the 13 colonies, okay? Ever since the 13 colonies achieved their independence between 1783 and 1804, Spain repeatedly revoked the right of American settlers further upriver to export their products through the New Orleans. Each time they did so, Western settlers began to think about shifting their allegiances. Worried United States officials repeatedly tried to negotiate the sale and cession of the city near the Mississippi's mouth, but Spain, trying to protect its own empire by containing the new nation's growth, just as repeatedly rebuffed them. So you see, we had France over here, Spain in the United States, and the white American colonists bidding for pieces of this new land that had been cleared of the original people, the red nations of the United States. Okay, I'm now going to jump to Blake or the Huts of America. All right, and I want to talk a bit about Sampson. Think of Sampson. Now, Sampson is an enslaved man. Blake has visited his plantation, and Blake is spreading the word to all Black people on these plantations to resist, to cause revolution, to be an insurrectionist, to fight back against their enslavers. This is Blake's message. Now, of course, Delaney does not always spell it out really clearly for you to know, but it's definitely there. But I want you to, again, I want you to picture Sampson. Sampson is over 6 feet tall. He a big dude. All right? That's how Martin Delaney described him. He said he was black and handsome. Incredible. In the 18th, 19th century, to use black in that way. Okay? Now, understand this too. I'm going to give you a piece of what Sampson's life was like as an enslaved man. But before I do that, I want to say again that Sampson and his wife had saved $2,000, and we're talking about the 1800s. Lord God only knows how they did that, but they did. And there's a note in Blake that says Delaney actually had met an enslaved man on a plantation who showed him all the money that he had stowed away, because the man was putting together a plan to get him and his family, wife and children, out of bondage. But let me just share with you how Sampson, this beyond 6 foot tall big dude, what he did for his master. He was his body servant. Now, this is his master talking now. Samson, Samson, stand by me, my man. Stand at your master's back, was the language of the sottish old imbecile. He kept continually reveling at a gambling table, and who, from excessive fatigue, would sometimes squat at or sit down on the floor behind his master. Samson, Samson, are you there? Stand by your master, Samson. Again, he would exclaim, so soon as the tall, commanding form of his black protector was missed from sight. Now, can you imagine Muhammad Ali, LeBron James, or just picture any athlete that you admire who is black being talked to like this by his master, who is gambling, and he's also quite a drinker? That his body servant was to stand by him and always let the master know that he is there. So, in any event, Blake stayed with these people for a night or two, the whole family. And let me tell you what they ate. They ate ash cake and sweet milk. Now, let me tell you about ash cake. Ash cake was like cornbread today, but very often enslaved people did not have pots and pans. So what they would do is to make a fire, and they would put the ingredients of the cornbread, known as ash cake back then, right on the fire, and it would form, all right, into I guess like a round cake-like substance. And they would pull it out of the fire, dust off all of the ashes, and they would eat it. This was part of the slave diet. And Sampson was so happy to meet Blake. In fact, Sampson and his wife said that they had been expecting a man like Blake to come along, because God, they said, had spoken to them, and they knew that they would find a redeemer and be released from bondage. But understand this, nobody was actually going to release them. Power has to be taken. Power is rarely given. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to jump to Brother Fred. We got to read Brother Fred, this is so important, what I'm about to read to you. And I'm saying it's so important, people, because it's just a reminder that a few centuries ago, it was illegal for Black people to be taught how to read. Enslavers knew that reading would spoil a slave. Now, if a slave is unlearned, if a slave is ignorant of how the country works, of how to use his own mind, how to make decisions, how to become more knowledgeable, then that was no longer a good slave. So it was illegal to teach an enslaved person to read, and certainly if he can't read, he can't write. So let's listen to what Brother Fred had to say about this. I wish to learn how to write, as I might have occasion to write my own pass. A pass would be something that the enslaved people would have to carry if they were going from one region of a place where they were enslaved to another. They always had to carry a pass. This was a way so that white people could cut back on runaways leaving their owners. All right. So Fred says, I wish to learn how to write, as I might have occasion to write my own pass. I consoled myself with the hope that I should one day find a good chance. Meanwhile, I would learn to write. The idea as to how I might learn to write was suggested to me by being in Durgin and Bailey's shipyard and frequently seeing the ship carpenters, after hewing and getting a piece of timber ready for use, write on the timber the name of that part of the ship for which it was intended. When a piece of timber was intended for the larboard side, it would be marked thus, L. When a piece was for the starboard side, it would be marked thus, S. A piece for larboard side forward would be marked thus, LF. When a piece was for starboard side forward, it would be marked thus, SF. For larboard off, aft, I guess that is, it would be marked thus, LA. For starboard aft, it would be marked thus, SA. I soon learned the names of these letters and for what they were intended. When placed upon a piece of timber in the shipyard, I immediately commenced copying them, and in a short time was able to make the 4 letters named. I'm going to stop right there with Brother Fred, because this is my surprise. Another book. Now, check this out. This book is called Clotel or the President's Daughter, and it's written by William Wells Brown in 1853. Like Fred, William Wells Brown was an enslaved child. Like Fred, William Wells Brown was a biracial enslaved child. So was Fred. Always remember that. All right? Because the third section of this episode is called Enslavers, Biracial Children. Now understand this. Fred's father was his master. He didn't want Fred to know how to read. William Wells Brown's master, too, didn't want his offspring to learn how to read. In fact, understand this, people. These white father enslavers sold their own children. Oh, yes, they did. Now, William Wells Brown, in this book, he shares his narrative, but he also wrote a book called Clotel or the President's Daughter. Let me see if I can find that, a recent version of it. Now, this is Clotel. That's Clotel or the President's Daughter. And William Wells Brown is talking about Thomas Jefferson's daughter. Now, Thomas Jefferson had lots of daughters and sons. But in 1853, you couldn't, that would have been suicide to write all of that. So what William Wells Brown did was to show us, by focusing on one of Thomas Jefferson's daughter, he wrote this story about this biracial woman who was the daughter of the president. Now, the narrative of William Wells Brown, it's now separated from the novel he wrote called Clotel. Now, here's Clotel. This you could get today, just says Clotel. All right. But my version, see, my books are old. My version has the narrative of William Wells Brown and Clotel all in one book. So I wanted to read to you a little bit about, what is this? Oh, yeah, here we are. A little bit about William Wells Brown, who, similar to Fred Douglass, was an enslaved biracial child. William Wells Brown, the subject of this narrative, was born a slave in Lexington, Kentucky, not far from the residence of the late Honorable Henry Clay. His mother was the slave of Dr. John Young. His father was a slaveholder, and besides being a near relation to his master, was connected with the Wycliffe family, one of the oldest, wealthiest, and most aristocratic of the Kentucky planters. Dr. Young was the owner of 40 or 50 slaves, whose chief employment was in cultivating tobacco, hemp, corn, and flax. The doctor removed from Lexington when William was 5 or 6 years old to the state of Missouri and commenced farming in a beautiful and fertile valley within a mile of the Missouri River. Here, the slaves were put to work under a harsh and cruel overseer named Cook. A finer situation for a farm could not have been selected in the state. With climate favorable to agriculture and soil rich, the products came in abundance. At an early age, William was separated from his mother. Remember, Fred was separated from his mother too. Remember that Fred's mom used to come at midnight or later to just hold on to her baby boy and then get back to her new plantation. Well, William Wells was separated from his mother too, but in a different way. She being worked in the field and he as a servant in his master's medical department. So doctors had slaves too during this time period. When about 10 years of age, the young slave's feelings were much hurt at hearing the cries of his mother while being flogged by the Negro driver for being a few minutes behind the other hands in reaching the field. He heard her cry, "Oh, pray, oh, pray, oh, pray," as she was being whipped. These are the words which slaves generally utter when imploring mercy at the hands of their oppressors. The son heard it, though he was some way off. He heard the crack of the whip and the groans of his poor mother. The cold chill ran over him, and he wept aloud. But he was a slave like his mother and could render her no assistance. He was taught by the most bitter experience that nothing could be more heart-rendering than to see a dear and beloved mother or sister tortured by unfeeling men, and to hear her cries and not not be able to render the least aid. William Wells Brown. That's his narrative. And I wanted to stop there for a moment because I need to talk to you for just a minute so that you could actually see what you have accomplished. Now, I started this series in January of this year, 2025. My first episode was on January, here it is, January the 14th. Now, this is now, and what did I start with? Let me show you the book I started with. Murder Incorporated, all right? Empire, Genocide, Manifest Destiny, Mumia Abu Jamal and Stephen Victoria. That's the book I started with, right? From January to April, this is April 8th. I want all of you within the sound of my voice who have been following me to understand that you have now been exposed to and read to from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different books. 5 different books, people. So those of you who think, well, reading, I can't read, I don't want to read, I'm good, this is old. 5 books, Jack, understand that. I am so proud of you, truly. Because that particular thing, the reading of a book that was denied to our ancestors, tells you that you must read. You must read or be read to, or both, so that we can create another generation of enlightened individuals. Because right now, with all of this technology at your fingertips, it is dumbing down the brain. I am certainly not the only person saying this. All right? Theorists, philosophers, scholars of all stripes are saying this now because there is a decline in general American intellectualism. Well, I hope to overturn that, especially for my people. Especially for my people. So it's imperative, especially for those of you who think, no, I can't read, I don't have time. Make time. Make time for yourself and make time for your children. This is what you must do. This is what you must do. Do not get caught up. Chinex, I don't know how to say your name, but thank you. Thank you for the comment. Do not simply just get caught up in American culture. American culture. I'm trying to find another banner that I made. I'll try this one. I don't know. Anyway, American culture is made, seriously, especially the new elements in American culture, is made to keep you stupid. It's made to keep you stupid. Even down to like when I'm out in my car, I look at the bus stops, I see mothers on their phone and the little babies jumping all around their legs. They're not teaching their children anything about the world. They're caught up in technology. And check this out. If you don't use your brain, you'll lose your brain. It's just like with your body. If you don't work out, you will be fat, sloppy, and prone to disease. Prone to diseases. These are just facts, people. That's what's up. Next thing I want to say, I'm trying to find the right banner. I don't know if this is the one you are. Okay, I'll take this one. Look, those of you with children, and if you don't have children, but you're an adult, get somebody else's children and help them. All right, especially if you know you're not crazy. Now, if you know you're a little out of balance mentally. Get yourself some help, then go help the children. But this is the point. If you got children, they should be learning an instrument, any kind of musical instrument that they want to learn. Let them learn it from childhood. They should also be involved in some kind of movement and sport or sport. Okay? Whatever they want to do. And by the way, if your children say, well, I don't want to, I just don't, be a parent. They need to work their bodies and learn how their bodies work. They need to be knocked around so that their body can know how to recover from any kind of a small injury. They need to know how to play some kind of an instrument, because an instrument, learning a musical instrument and learning to read music is like learning a new language. And if it is possible, definitely teach your children another language of your choice. Now, that might not always be possible, but learning them on a instrument is, okay? Getting them some kind of sports train, any kind. Any kind. And if you're really broke, just don't have your children run around the house and clock it. Have them move. Have them stop eating after 6 o'clock. Enough. So that their body would have time to digest the food. These things are important. They may seem like they're trivial. They're not. This country did not come together for your benefit. It came together for the benefit of the very rich who run the country right now. And if you remember what I just read to you about France and Spain and the American whites, there's always been wars. By the way, is there wars now in 2025? Just think about it, okay? There was a genocide of the Native American people. Do we see a genocide now in 2025? I'm just asking because I want you to be more aware of the world in which you live. And I'm trying to find the banner I just made, but I can't seem to find it because it's an important banner. And then I'm going to check out of here. No, not that one. Let's see. Let me come down because this is my goal. Here it is. Hey, Regina Jennings is not living just for herself. I'm living for the Black future. It's no question in my mind. I'm not living my individualistic life. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale didn't teach me that. Kathleen Cleaver didn't teach me that. Erica Huggins didn't teach me that. Members of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense didn't teach me to just live for my individual self. So I'm not. I'm living for you and for me and for the world. And I hope what I do with Readings with Regina will at least do something wonderful for many of you. Well, it's time for me to clock off, but I will see you again this week on Thursday, same time, same place. Know that you are loved.